When the hunters were carrying the Goral to camp, we met Yvette and Hiller on their way to visit the traps just below Snowline, and she returned with me to photograph the animal and to watch the ceremonies which I knew would be performed. One of the natives cut a leafy branch, placed the Goral upon it, and at the first cut chanted a prayer. Then, laying several leaves one upon the other, he sliced off the tip of the heart, wrapped it carefully in the leaves, and placed it in a nearby tree as an offering to the god of the hunt. I have often seen the Chinese and Korean hunters perform similar ceremonies at the death of an animal, and the idea that it is necessary to propitiate the god of the hunt is universal. When I was shooting in Korea in 1912 and also in other parts of China, if luck had been against us for a few days, the hunters would invariably ask me to buy a chicken or some animal to sacrifice for good joss.
It is difficult to imagine a life of greater dreariness and vacuity than that of the average Chinese woman. Owing to her bound feet and resultant helplessness, if she is not obliged to work, she rarely stirs from the narrow confinement of her courtyard, and perhaps in her entire life she may not go a mile from the house to which she was brought as a bride. Her work is actually never done, and a Chinese bride, bright and attractive at 20, will be old and faded at 30. But without doubt the crowning evil which attends woman's condition in China is foot-binding, and nothing can be offered in extenuation of this abominable custom. It is said to have originated 1,000 years before the Christian era, and has persisted until the present day in spite of the efforts directed against it. The Empress Dowager issued edicts strongly advising its discontinuation. The Natural Foot Society, which was formed about 15 years ago, has endeavored to educate public opinion, and the missionaries refuse to admit girls so mutilated to their schools. But nevertheless, the reform has made little progress beyond the coast cities.
Before I left New York, Mr. Caldwell had written me repeatedly, urging me to stop at Futsing on the way to Yunnan to try with him for the blue tiger which was still in the neighborhood. I was decidedly skeptical as to its being a distinct species, but nevertheless it was a most interesting animal and would certainly be well worth getting. We hunted the animal for 5 weeks. The brute ranged in the vicinity of 2 or 3 villages about 7 miles apart, but was seen most frequently near Lung Tao. He was as elusive as the will-o'-the-wisp, killing a dog or a goat in one village, and by the time we had hurried across the mountain, appearing in another spot a few miles away, leaving a trail of terrified natives who flocked to our camp to recount his depredations. He was, in truth, the great invisible, and it seemed impossible that we should not get him sooner or later. But we never did. Crouched behind the screens of branches, for 3 long hours we sat in the patchwork shade, motionless, dripping with perspiration, hardly breathing, and watched the shadows steal slowly down the narrow ravine. It was a wild place, which seemed to have been cut out of the mountainside with 2 strokes of a mighty axe. Harry suddenly turned to me and said, "Roy, let's go into the lair. There's just 1 chance in 1,000, and we may get a shot." Now, I must admit that I was not very enthusiastic about that little excursion, but in we went, crawling on our hands and knees up the narrow passage. Every few feet we passed side branches from the main tunnel, in any one of which the tiger might easily have been laying in wait and could have killed us as we passed. It was a foolhardy thing to do, and I am free to admit that I was scared. It was not long before Harry twisted about and said, "Roy, I haven't lost any tigers in here. Let's get out." And out we came faster than we went in. This was only one of the times when the great invisible was almost in our hands.